Declaration of Independence? Doesn't that remind you upon the very idea of the reason the Pilgrims came to the United States in the very first place? Then we see down towards the end of the Gettysburg Address, Lincoln makes the statement that our nation under God. I don't know. I'm not a historian to the point that I can really depend on what I'm going to say right now, but I believe that this is the very first time in a speech of a president of the United States that the term under God was used. I'm not sure. And I don't know whether you know it or not, but Abraham Lincoln was baptized into the Church of Christ Christian Church. That is a fact. In fact, there was one other president that was a part of the Christian Church, Church of Christ, and that was Garfield. Two others were a part of it, but they would not do the things that I feel they should do. But I want you to think just for a moment of that Christian heritage. Down through the years, while we have had struggles with good and evil, the greatest influence in our nation until recently has been Christian influence. Can we honestly say that about our nation today? That the greatest influence in our nation today is based upon Christianity? I don't think we can. In fact, if President Obama, and I don't want to get involved with politics, but if President Obama has ever said anything right, it was the idea that this is no longer a Christian nation. Now, I don't want to get involved with politics. I want to stay away from it as possible. Whether they're Republicans or Democrats or independents or whatever, I am not happy today with the things that are coming out of Washington, D.C. Are you? I'm not. And the thing that displeases me more than anything else is the fact that we're leaving the very basis of our heritage, which is Christianity. And I think it's time that we get back to our first love, which was Christ and Christianity. The second thing that I notice here, and it is very, very interesting. I want to have to be sure I get the right section of this. But the second thing is the idea that we as a nation need to really recognize the fact that there was a great sacrifice that many have made. The sacrifice of life. Now, I realize that there are a number of people here who served in the Army or Navy or the Armed Forces. Some of you may have even been put in harm's way. I never have, and I tried, but I could not do it, mainly because I was a ministerial student and they would not take me. But we need to realize the idea that there are many people that are suffering today from conflicts that they were in hundreds of years ago, but it might be emotionally. Not hundreds of years ago, but several years ago. They're suffering emotionally. And I firmly believe that as Christians, we need to be thankful to those who have sacrificed so much in serving our country in armed services. And by the way, I don't think there's a family in their existence today in the United States that has not been affected in some way. In some way. By the wars that we've been through. I think of a aunt of my mother's mother's sister, Aunt Emma, Uncle John. They had two boys. Both of them served in the services during the Second World War. Only one came back. So my life, and we were very close to that family, and my life has been affected by it. We need to give praise to those. But the thing that I think Abraham Lincoln said in his Gettysburg Address is found in this idea that the world will little note, nor long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here. Then he goes on and says, it is for us, the living. And I think these words are just as true today as they were when Abraham Lincoln gave it. It is for us, the living, to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they who fought here have thus far so nobly advanced. We need to realize that we have a responsibility to those who gave their lives in each and every war skirmish that we have been in, to dedicate our lives to the fact that we will not lose the very basis upon which we as a nation became great, and that is the Christian heritage. Listen to how it goes on. He said that we need to be further dedicated, that our nation, that these will not have died in vain, but our nation, for the people, by the people, will not have perished from the face of this earth. We have a responsibility, I think, to our nation. As Christians, what do we need to do? First of all, I think we ought to pray for our nation. I'm sure we have many people here that pray every day. Maybe some people pray more than once a day. I think every time we pray, we ought to include our nation in our prayers. I think every time that we have an election, we ought to be sure that we put men in office that are dedicated to the Christian principles, that will stand up upon the basis, the very basis that they have done. I think as Christians, we need to continue to be good Christians. I have said many, many times, and I'm going to say it again, that I believe that the best American is a dedicated Christian. Think about that just for a minute. And we, as Christian people, need, as Christian people, to stand upon God's Word, that we might be able to preserve that Christian heritage. There are two scriptures in the Old Testament that I like to read. And by the way, I had them earlier in my notes and I purposely bypassed them. But these two scriptures are Proverbs 14:34. Righteousness exalteth a nation, but sin is a reproach to any people. And when we talk about righteousness, what are we talking about? We're talking about living right in the eyes of God. Oh, you'll hear many great arguments and many great discussions and many great philosophies about some of the things that are going on in the world today, our nation today. But I'm going to tell you something. I am upset with our states honoring same-sex marriage. I am upset with many of our states going to legalized marijuana. I'm upset with people that are in office doing things that are vile and wretched. And not only in the United States, but think of the Mayor of Toronto, Canada, what he's going through. It shames me to realize that they are in political office representing the philosophy of the nation they serve, of the people they serve. Then we go on to another one. Isaiah 5:20. Woe unto them that call evil good and good evil, that put darkness for light and light for darkness, that put bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter. Woe. And by the way, that is in a series of woes that Isaiah gave, and every one of them applies to our nation today, but some of the things that are going on. We as Christian people need to be dedicated to the proposition of the Christian heritage upon which we've been built. And we need to be dedicated to continuing with Christ's principles. And by the way, I firmly believe that we as Christians ought to obey God rather than man. I don't care what laws are given. I'm going to obey the laws of God first and foremost. We need to be dedicated. I challenge you as Christians, and I challenge you as Americans, that you pray daily and that you live solidly for Christ, that you might be influenced and bring our nation back to the heritage upon which we've been built. Will you accept that challenge? We're going to be singing our song of invitation. Just as I am. We'll sing the first verse only. And as we do so, let's do so prayerfully, in the sense that we are dedicating ourselves as American Christians to do the best we can to preserve the righteousness upon which we've been built. Shall we stand as we sing? If there's any here that needs to accept Christ, place your membership, whatever it may be, we invite you to come as we stand and we sing.